For those of you who already know Maurice, he doesn't need much introduction, but for those of you who may not, let me just briefly introduce Maurice Harker to you, who is the founder and the director of Life-Changing Services. Maurice is the third of 9 sons, and he grew up in southeast Idaho and moved to Farmington, Utah, where he graduated from high school at Davis High. And he excelled academically, athletically, and musically there. He served a mission in Detroit, Michigan. He then completed a bachelor's degree at the University of Utah, majored in psychology and minored in mathematics. Maurice is married to his wife, Nanette, and after marrying, he adopted his 3-year-old son, Nicholas. And as he was finishing his professional counseling master's degree at the University of Utah, he started working as a counselor at LDS Family Services in Farmington. And his daughter, Serena, joined the family during graduate school. In May of 2005, Maurice opened the private counseling agency, Life-Changing Services, while he was still working part-time at the LDS Family Services, and was working as a pre-mission evaluation specialist for Northern Utah. In September of 2005, the Sons of Healing program was created due to the influx of young men who were struggling with sexual addiction issues who were hoping to serve missions. And the development and expansion of this program has been a major focus for Maurice since then. In his ongoing private practice at Life-Changing Services, Maurice specializes in marriage therapy, especially if sexual misbehaviors are part of the issue, and he also trains adult men to overcome sexual addictions. He works to help heal the lives of sexual addicts, and he works with individuals fighting with anxiety and depression issues. He also works with the young men as well. He leads many programs at Life-Changing Services that are designed to help relieve pain in LDS individuals and families. So today, Maurice is going to be sharing some powerful principles and insights that we use in our addiction recovery, self-mastery, and addiction prevention programs. And this particular webinar is the 3rd in our monthly series. And we've entitled this webinar, Your Mind is Like a Garden. So Maurice will be sharing principles for about 40-45 minutes, and then we'll have a 15 to 20 minute Q&A period where we'll answer as many questions as we can. So Maurice, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Ruben, and thank you to all who are available to join us this evening. The impetus, the motivation behind this event is because I'm feeling very strongly these days about making sure the insights, the concepts, the principles that I've been working on trying to discover on individual self-mastery, on the ideas, the principles, the interventions needed for the average person, a regular person, to make the changes they want to make in their life so that they can walk away from painful behaviors, painful circumstances, and move on to a life that is more according to their values. In lesson 1, we talked about the war between remembering and forgetting. In lesson 2, which is a whole lot more scientific, we talked about the chemical scale and the satanic spin. Today is just going to be a little softer approach, a little more analogy, a little more general concept, but a lot more application. And so you'll be able to feel exactly, or to have some really basic tools on how to begin moving your brain, your mind, your behaviors, your life, the direction that you want to. For those of you who are major students of this subject, some of this might sound like a repeat for some of the principles that you've already studied, but I encourage you to listen carefully and take some notes so that you can perhaps find something you haven't seen before. Okay, I'd like to get started sharing some of these principles with you. And as I think about where you're sitting right now in your homes and with your families, and some of you have gathered some of your youth with you, some of you are adults, some of you are youth who are ambitious and you want to get some things figured out. So much of what I teach starts from my own agony, from my own struggles, from my own frustration. When I was introduced to, well, before I mention that part, you're going to see as I present today a significant blend, a significant synergy is what I hope you'll find it to be, of eternal principles interlocking with accurate science. For 25 years now, I have not been won over completely by the science of psychology and of self-mastery. And I found that those who receive their information directly from God, the prophets, both modern and ancient, pan out to be the wiser of the two. And so I am challenged from time to time by people who are what you might call pure scientists. But I just suggest to them, just wait and see, and you'll see that these principles carry more clout with them. One of the principles that caused me a great deal of agony in my developmental years was a scary principle at one time called repentance. And as I transferred that into more of a scientific term, the one major element of repentance is change. It's the process of going from how I functioned before to the way I want to function. And then once I get some measurable progress, while this atonement thing that we learn about has the power to heal no matter what I do, no matter how far I work, is so fulfilling and so complete when the experience is a combination of my change and of divine healing. And so today we're going to talk a lot about the part that you do, the part that we do. We make no effort whatsoever to replace religion with the works that we provide. So we're going to talk about the part that we are involved in, the part that we work to change and to solidify the change, to make it stick, and why it doesn't stick, and why we commit to something and we start to fall apart sometimes and we get frustrated with it. And so this is all anchored in a story that took place in my youth. When I was a young man, my father and mother were both farmers from Idaho, significant farmers. I had no idea before I reached adulthood what that really meant. Dairy cows, potato fields in huge ways. This is all up in the Idaho Falls, Shelley area of Idaho. And when my father made sure we had a sixth of an acre garden, compared to everybody else around us, that was a huge garden. It was giant, and there was tons of work. And he tried not to remind us how little work that was compared to what he had done. But because I don't mind being lazy at that age, I don't want to do more work. I don't do more work than I have to. Later, we'll talk about something called the efficiency mechanism. But because I didn't want to do more work than I had to, one Saturday morning, which was the tradition, I went out to the garden and to complete my rows, to pull the weeds in my rows where I was responsible for. I was so careful. I was so meticulous. I wanted to get it right. And mostly so that I didn't have to do it next week or ever again. So I weeded my rows like crazy. I walked away at peace. The next week, I laid there in bed as my father did his morning rounds on Saturday. Let's go, boys. Let's go out to the garden. And I says to him, I'm good, Dad. Mine are done. I don't need to go out to the garden today. We're good. Okay. And he says, okay, then. I guess he thought maybe I got up early, like 4 a.m, and went out and did it because he let me lay there in bed. So he went out, and I was falling back asleep when he came back, and he says, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. And I'm like, why? Why do I have to go out there? He said, because the weeds are back. The weeds are back. And I was so mad and I was so angry. And I was so frustrated with this experience. Now, years later, I have discovered the similarity between plots of land and the human brain. In plots of land, if you don't take care of it, if you don't garden it, it will start to grow weeds. It will start to have responses that are against what we prefer. I was giving a client of mine an orientation to this idea, and she said, "Hey, let me send you some pictures. Let me send you some pictures." So I want to show you these pictures that she sent me. She says, "I've got a place that would look really good for your presentation. And so observe how if a piece of property is not attended to, if a brain is not attended to, the weeds can grow and grow and grow. And so these represent a couple of angles at a location where it's unattended to, and yes, brains can be the same. All right. Now, let me step away from that. Okay. So I would venture to say that there are many of you out there who have this experience of really trying to get your brain on track, and you're hoping that by getting it on track and just kind of pushing it forward, you can kind of coast. I did it. I worked hard. I got my brain on track. Everything was going good. And so I can just let it roll. Just let it roll, and I can coast off of what occurred there. We have a question that was put in the preliminary questions. How is a garden like and not like a computer? How is it unlike a computer? While there's a lot of programming that can take place in the human mind, while there's a lot of instructions you can give your brain and some systems you can get to execute for yourself, in this element of it, your brain is more like a garden than it is like a computer. Because if you just program and you hope it'll do it on its own, it will get worse. It'll deteriorate. It'll start to not function correctly. It'll start to interrupt your preferred method of functioning, and then you'll start to cross the boundaries of your values. In previous presentations, you heard me use a term called lost battles. Lost battles are any time your behavior contradicts your value system. Anytime your behavior contradicts your value system, that's called a lost battle. And one of the most common precursors of that experience of crossing line into behaviors that you do not support for yourself is we forget. Our brains get a little quagmired with the things that are going on in there, and we forget there's chemical elements to that, there's psychological disruption, there's social disruption. But whatever it is, the weeds get in the way. And so now scientists who try to explain what's happening inside the brain, and this is one of my biggest frustrations, and I mentioned this in more detail in the previous presentations, they're really reluctant to consider the possibility that there is an intelligent outside force playing a role in this process of behavior crossing the line of the value system. It is my testimony, it's my personal witness, it's my experience and that of many that we work with, that there is an intelligent entity that makes an effort to float and slip ideas into our mind for the purpose of good things. We call this the Holy Ghost, and to ignore that is an illogical scientific thing to do. It's also illogical to ignore the fact that there is an intelligent being that will slip or slide or nudge not so useful things into our brains. There is a story in the New Testament that refers or alludes to this. There is a story where a man, a farmer, a man who wants to grow good things, has planted a field and sent his servants out to do a good job of furrowing the rows and watering them and getting everything started correctly. And then in the night, an outside entity. Now you'll notice in the story, it doesn't say that the man who owned the garden, in a state of unconsciousness, left his home and walked around his own field throwing tare seeds, or the seeds of weeds, into his own garden. This is such a popular concept in psychology, where ideas are being, the idea is that we do this to ourselves. because scientists struggle with the idea of an intelligent outside entity, the conclusion that they come to is we do this to ourselves. We throw negative thoughts into our own brains. Okay? It makes all the difference when you know where the thoughts that are causing congestion, causing twistedness in your mind are coming from an outside source, because if it's from the inside, then it creates something I described in a previous meeting called a psychological civil war. If you understand it's an outside enemy, you can now strategize correctly how to get it out of your head. In a previous meeting and in future meetings, I'll be spending more time on the concept of if you have a ferocious enemy, a intense enemy, one that's more aggressive. Today, we're going to talk about more of the less aggressive, like if it's just plants and we're just working with plants, if it's just thoughts and we're just working with thoughts. And so now, I do remember having a significantly strong emotional experience. There's a ceremony that we LDS people are familiar with where we are reminded of some elements of the Adam and Eve story. And there was a time, and maybe this is how human brains experienced their life experience at one time, where their brains just naturally had great ideas and naturally had insightful ideas and just produced good fruit with pretty much zero effort. Well, something happened in the Adam and Eve story, and there was a transition that took place. And they were sent to a place where no longer would good things grow naturally. That if anything good was going to be at their fingertips to use, they were going to have to acquire it by the sweat of thy brow, by their own labor. I was so angry when I first learned this. Like, you're telling me that this is like part of the human existence and I'm going to have to deal with this for my whole life, that I'm going to have to work in my own head to pull out the negative and put in the positive and pull out the negative and put in the positive the same way I had to in my father's backfield in the garden. That if I wanted to have a harvest of psychology, of thinking, of feeling, of behavior, I was going to have to resign myself to work, to daily work. And it wasn't an option to just program it and hope it would work on its own. So let's get into specifics on how this is done. Okay. I'm having emotional reactions to my own notes. One of the most common errors that is made, let me add a story to this. Let me throw in my story. I'm going to go back to my screen share here, and I'm going to give you some pictures to look at. The next picture. Now, do you remember maybe if you were a youth, hope this works out okay. There we go. Do you remember maybe when you were in elementary school age or something like that, and your Sunday school primary teacher was going to do the whole faith is like a seed story? And so you're supposed to plant the seed, and you're supposed to nurture it, and it's supposed to grow, and maybe you get to a cute little thing like this. Well, I've recently coined a phrase that might be used by others, or maybe it came from somebody else, called microwave mentality. Microwave mentality is when you take a burrito, you take something you want to eat, you put it in the microwave, you push 60 seconds, 2 minutes, and it's good. Okay? In contrast with farmer mentality or with gardening mentality. Now, I've heard stories of youth, children, whatever. This is what the cup looks like when you bring it home. This picture of an empty cup with some dirt in it. And the teacher tells you that if you'll take this and you put a little bit of water in it and you put it in your windowsill, that you will get this. Now, it's not really a surprise when a youth goes up to their windowsill the next morning and pulls the cup off the windowsill, looks in it and sees this, a cup of dirt, and goes, it's not working. Okay? So they reach their finger in and pop the seed out and go, it's not working. And then they put it back in and they put it in the windowsill again. And they wake up the next morning hoping to see this. And again, the next day, they go out and they see this again. Now, when you have microwave mentality, when you have this disposition of I should have results by now, I should have results by now, I should have results by now, that's going to be very aggravating, and you can see the child throwing the cup into the garbage and saying, this isn't working. Now, sadly, as a clinician, this happens a lot in the therapeutic work that I do, okay? It's very agonizing how frequently this happens. We'll have someone read a part of a book, and within days, they're all, it's not working for me. We'll have them come to therapy, come to group therapy, Minim Moroni, Sons of Heathen, something like that, and within a few days, maybe even a week or two, they're all, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working. We call this microwave mentality. It's a very common side effect of addiction or self-mastery issues. So many elements of our current lives now are so fast in response. And really, unfortunately, when it comes to addictive level behaviors, and we're not going to cover all the science of endorphins and GABA and all those other things that go on in the human brain, but you click, you're rewarded. You click, you're rewarded. You click, you're rewarded. This happens with video games. This happens with pornography. This happens with, I'll just pick up a book and read it now. I'll just take a drink now. I'll just cross the line with parenting right now. I'll just spank my child now beyond what I should. I should yell louder than I should now. I got results. I got results when I did it the wrong way. And so we can get stuck in microwave mentality instead of following the concept of the law of the harvest. Okay. So how do we plant and nurture good seeds that will eventually bear fruit? Now, this is where a true addict will get bored. A true self-mastery person will get bored because it doesn't sound exciting. What does a farmer do in order to get a good harvest? What does a farmer do to get a good harvest? Now, he prepares the soil. He gets ready to learn things. He gets ready to learn things. He gets ready to learn things now. Often pride is referred to as one of the main things that keeps people from learning things. They're too prideful to learn. They're just too prideful. I've actually discovered that that is unignorable, but fear can be an even higher reason that people have rough soil. They fear that they're going to discover the pain of being wrong instead of the embarrassment of being wrong. They're afraid they're going to go, oh my gosh, I didn't have this right. This is very difficult. This is very hard. I've experienced quite a bit of this myself with going, man, I've spent years living off of a philosophy that I've just found out is not accurate. This is very agonizing for me. This is very frustrating for me. And so I call it rotor tilling someone's brain. What if you're wrong? What if it's different? What if it's not as the way you thought it was going to be? What if you need to come at it from a different angle? What if you got a little entrenched with a certain idea and you need to step at it from a different direction? So I do a lot of whatabouts. Are you prepared to think about this differently? Are you prepared to approach it from a different angle? Okay, so that's the first part of preparing your soil. Are you ready to hear something you've never heard before? Are you ready to experience something from a different angle than you have before? Are you ready to receive new information? Okay, now, the next piece is not really that complicated except for the follow through on it. I myself, and I see this with many people that I meet, I just need to think about it some more. I just need to think about it some more. I just need to think about it some more. Pondering is a really good idea if you have a lot of information in your head to ponder. I considered myself a smart person when I really started studying these things. I was embarrassed to find out that there was a whole lot of stuff I didn't know, a whole lot of ways about seeing things that I didn't understand. I don't have this in my notes, but I want to refer to it. I initiated a scripture memorization system as a missionary because in Detroit, you don't get a chance to teach a lot, and so I needed something to do with my time. And I had some positive, fascinating results from it. Every day I would read, and this is something I do recommend. Every day in my reading, I would look for a seed, a nugget, a idea, a concept. Now, don't look for the ones that you should use. Look for things that make a difference for you. Like some reading, I go, hey, this concept means something to me. Now, it's a little misunderstanding that it's going to stick. Like, okay, I've got it. Now I don't have to do it. This happens all the time in my group settings. Are you writing this down? No, I heard you. I've got it. I've got it. It's going to stick. In a previous meeting, we talked about a thing called the telephone game inside your brain. Go and review lesson number 2 for this. Okay. But I took a seed, an idea, and I wrote it on a 3x5 card and put it in my pocket. And after days, weeks, I had 1 card per day. And something started to happen. Every time I would review the card, it was like the roots of a tree going a little bit deeper. But then something surprised me. Because I would kind of shuffle the cards and intermix the order that I would review them in, about a dozen per day, then a different card that I wasn't expecting was going to be right next to it, and that one would grow a little bit, and the 2 principles from random locations in conference talks and scriptures would go a little bit deeper and would intertwine. I would see a connection between the 2 concepts where I would go, oh, wow, there's an insight between those 2 concepts. And then I'd pull up the next card and review it and ponder it, and then the more interconnections would occur. And what happened over time of reviewing dozens and dozens and dozens and hundreds and over 450 verses memorized or viewed multiple times, it became this interlocking root system in my brain, which has been a very powerful thing to be able to have in my head when the winds of inaccurate information, of things that would sway me, etc., and of even emotional things that could have knocked me off my base. So what this boils down to, I call this a one-sided 3x5 card method. Every day, or as frequently as you can, find a principle that is important to you, that you have the idea there's something here. There's something valuable here. And write it down and carry it with you and review it as often as you can. Now, there are such things as electronic 3x5 cards. I was introduced lately to, my daughter uses in her schooling something called Quizlet, where you put one concept on one side and the 3x5, and then you just tap it and do flashcards on your phone. I'm sure there's dozens of different apps like that that function like flashcards. Okay. But in my second piece of my presentation, I'll tell you about the 2-sided 3x5 card. Okay. But this concept of getting an idea, planning your head and pushing it in, reviewing it, helps it really stick. Now, when you're not sitting there, when you're not engaged in like a really deep thing, you don't have to be sitting there. If there's one phrase I've repeated a whole lot more than most other phrases, just push play. With modern technology, with LDS.org, with audible.com, with so many things, just push play, and you don't have to concentrate on what you're listening to. Just let it play while you're doing dishes, while you're mowing the lawn, while you're walking around the park, while you're folding laundry, even while you're at work. If you got music usually playing in the background, go ahead and put this in the background. Just let it play. Just let it play. In a previous session, I talked a little bit more in detail about what that does to your mind. So check out lesson 3 for that. Now, this is all well and good, but what about the weeds? So here's how you do the weeding thing. In your pondering state, and again, you want to review one of the previous lessons on really identifying what I call satanic attacks or the seeds of weeds that plop into your head. So on a piece of paper, in a journal, when you're doing your pondering time, try to recall a thought that keeps showing up that's probably not from the Holy Ghost, okay? Don't debate whether or not it comes from you. That's not a good use of your time. Look at a thought that probably did not come from the Holy Ghost, okay? And it's, you're the dumbest one in your class. You'll never reach this goal. You can keep setting this goal, but you're never going to achieve it. All these different thoughts that are probably not edifying, okay? Now, when you're ready, you take the one, as soon as you have it clear, yep, that's the thought. That's the one that just keeps coming back. It can even be about other people. Your wife is a pain in the fanny. Your child is clueless. Your neighbor needs to be hit by a truck, or that other driver needs to lose their license, whatever it is, or my bishop needs to get fired. So whatever it is, the thought that's probably not edifying, write that on one side of a 3x5 card, okay? Then on the other side of the card, you write down the thought or feeling that you want to replace it. Now, this doesn't just have to be a thought. This can be a feeling, like, it's kind of funny. Every feeling actually comes with a thought. I hate taking tests. That's not a thought, that's a feeling. I hate taking tests. I abhor school. That's a feeling, right? I abhor school, right? Flip it over and write down what you want to feel. Write down the seed, the good seed that you want to plant in your head instead, right? So then what you're doing is you're going to be flipping this back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, all right? Now, there's a sport that has just finished its finale called baseball. And while I played a little bit of baseball in Little League, there's a very important lesson to learn from baseball, and that is how to hit a fast curveball. And while I may cover this in detail in another presentation, the main thing with this one is a batter, in order to get skilled at hitting a 90-mile-an-hour curveball, he's got to practice. He's got to practice doing it slow, and then he's got to do it faster and faster and faster and faster. So you take the 3x5 card and you treat it like a batting cage. You pull up the negative thought. That's the pitch coming at you. You flip it over and you take the positive thought and you hit back. You achieve it. You push it. You let it swarm your mind and you let it go. Okay, this is how I love school. I want to love school. I want to be ambitious about school. I want to perform well in school. And by the way, your response side of the card does not need to be one line. When I did them, I would fill in all sorts of phrases and comments to give it a complete response. So it can be one line on one side, but a whole bunch of doodles and paragraphs on the other side. Okay, when it says something like, I don't appreciate my wife. I don't appreciate my wife. You can start writing a whole bunch of things. I remember when she does this for me. I remember when she does that for me. I remember when she does this for me. She does this for me. She does that, just and that. Okay, those will help you flood your mind with positives. One that I talked over with a gentleman yesterday is he's lost confidence sometimes that God's actually going to help him follow through on something. I don't know, man. It's logically over my head. It's too big. Maurice, you don't understand. Repairing my marriage is too big. It's impossible. So we reviewed stories like David versus Goliath and Moses versus Pharaoh and Moses versus the Red Sea. And that other guy, I can never remember his name, Elijah or Elisha, who poured all the water on the altar and then the flames came down and took it up. And Joseph Smith versus the world, and the most modern one, 18-year-olds on missions. What an impossible concept. Okay? So on his card, he'll put this list of all these miracles that took place in situations that were logically inadequate. Okay? So if you really want your brain to grow a good garden, you can pray to have it protected. And there will be a degree of protection that takes place with that. But God never intended to protect us completely from negative thoughts. And even more important, and in addition to that, knowing that the thoughts do not come from you. Okay, I want to add one principle to this. Like if someone starts to throw some seeds in your head and they're just trying to convince you that, no, you are broken. No, there is something wrong with you. Okay, I want you to imagine, I'm switching over to a screen share again. This picture I'm about to show you is half funny, but half serious, and I want you to think about it when you look at it. Okay, there's our seeds, weeds of seeds ones, but I want you to imagine that you're a parent of a first grader, your very first grader, okay? And you're going in for a parent-teacher conference, your very first parent-teacher conference, and this is the teacher that you see. Okay? This is your first grade teacher, all right? This is the first grade teacher, and this teacher says, okay, parent, I need to know if you're honest parents, if you are logical parents, or if you're liar parents. Are you liar parents or are you honest parents? And we're honest parents. Okay, of course you have your little one with you sitting on those little chairs. And then this teacher pulls out a chart and a graph, and says, okay, according to this graph, according to the truth, your child is stupid. Your child is stupid. Okay? And then she looks at you and says, oh, you want to fight with me? You want to disagree? Look at this chart. According to this chart, your child is stupid compared to all the others. In fact, okay, let's look at the next chart. And according to logic, according to reality, your child is socially inept. Just a horribly unpleasant child. Just very difficult to work with, okay? Now, for those of you who have been to parent-teacher conferences, okay, for those of you who've sat with your child and sat with them and felt the anxiety of, my child's already scared, my child's already fearing that they're not going to do well in school. And then this teacher insists that you must be logical, okay? Now, why are we willing to lie to our children? Why? And that's such a trick phrase, right? Do we lie to them, or do we have confidence that to edify and inspire them will produce the better results? Now, I want you to take a recording of what goes on in your own head. And how many times have you heard the demon, Satan, have a parent-teacher conference with you and say, I have proof that you are not as smart as your friends. I have proof that there's something wrong with you. I have proof. What are you going to do? Just ignore it? We don't need someone to tell us that the seeds, the ideas, the thoughts that are derogatory, that are soul-crushing, that are disappointing, those are not the best way to talk to the human brain. But Satan will do it anyway. Okay, he will try anyway. So imagine this teacher just keeps insisting on talking to your child like this. You will flare up with ferocious protection of your child. You will probably never let your child be in the presence of that teacher again. I strongly encourage you to approach your brain the same way. Okay? In the same way that you would protect your child's brain from this type of parent-teacher conference, please protect your own brain. Refuse to listen to ideas, even if they sound like they're coming from yourself, because they're not. You're not coming from yourself. There's a 7,000-year-old genius who has figured out how to talk to you in your own voice in such a way that you believe it's coming from you. We've heard the phrase, the serpent was the most subtle of all the beasts of the field. And yes, he can pull off that trick. Okay? Now, in the last few minutes we have, I want to talk about something called the efficiency mechanism. The efficiency mechanism. Now, the short definition of what the efficiency mechanism, and in its origin, the efficiency mechanism is a positive concept. It refers to the tendency to find methods to do things that require the least amount of effort. Methods that require the least amount of effort. Almost every invention, so many inventions over the last 100 to 200 years are because of the efficiency mechanism. Is there a way to do this with less effort? Is there a way to do this with less effort? This is a powerful and useful idea until it's overused. Okay, until it's overused. One of the most devastating. Now, I'm not a detailed historian with such things, but if I may show you this picture, in our history, we had some really neat buildings. Whoops, wrong picture, but hey, that's okay. I'll just show it to you from here. We had some really neat buildings that were an icon to our country. And it's my understanding, with the limited amount of information I have about American history around the same time, for a decade or two before the unpleasant incident where airplanes were crashed into these two buildings. I'm not going to show any pictures about that because I don't care to add some trauma to anyone's life today. But our country had started transitioning its investments to good things like taking care of the poor and the homeless and lots of other government needs. And there was an inadequate amount of investment in the protection of our homeland. And so we were at risk, and we had some unpleasant things hit us, and lots of pain and damage were caused. This is because of a good thing that didn't go as planned, and it's called the efficiency mechanism. Please take a look at how you protect your brain. Imagine a farmer using the efficiency mechanism, a farmer who tries to use the least amount of water, the least amount of fertilizer, the least amount of sunlight, the least amount of work possible to have his garden grow. Unfortunately, that approach to gardening or farming is going to yield a very poor crop. Please double check to see if you're using the efficiency mechanism on your own cognitive processes. Okay, are you doing the least amount possible? Are you doing the least amount of planting of seeds, the least amount of pulling? Now, we can also overdo it. So in closing, I want to give you a list of some things that you're going to want to keep in mind as you do this. First thing, especially with those of you who are dealing with frequent behaviors that cross your value system, please be humble enough to use the wisdom of others to list out what is needed in order to have a strong and healthy garden. Now, this is a two-edged sword. Some people over-trust people, some people under-trust, all right? Now, I struggle with trusting people. I have met people who don't have my best interests at heart. Maybe you've met some similar ones. But I figure that at least reading, the people who take the time to write books, the people who take the time to make them available to me, most of them are very invested in just writing good principles. And besides, when I'm reading, I can control how much it's getting into my head. I can block some stuff out. I can highlight stuff. I can cross things out. But I'm using the wisdom of others. Okay? I have learned that the closer they are to prophets, the less I'm crossing out. The closer they are to just a self-help person, I might cross a little bit more out, but I want to use that. Phase one, use the wisdom of others, and if you do enough studying, you're going to see consistencies in what people are trying to teach you. Okay? Daily rituals, gardening, pulling weeds, adding water. We have, after all these years, I have boiled down the daily rituals into 6 basic categories. Manpower refers to 6 different things. Girl power refers to 6 different behaviors. If you haven't been introduced to these, our Eternal Warriors training that's mentioned at the bottom, what Ruben will give you some more information on, there's different ways you can be introduced to it. These things, an element of them is what some people refer to as a personal daily sacrament. And sacrament has many different meanings, but the phrase that they do always remember, rituals that remind you, like the 3x5 cards, things that remind you of your eternal principles, remind you of things that you care about, remind you of what you want to hold on to. 3x5 cards, I will just keep talking about them because of almost everything in my history. Reading gets the seeds in front of you. 3x5 card review is what gets them in your head, And then when you don't have a moment of intensity where you can really focus, just push play. Okay, these are some very basic concepts, but farming is not that complicated. Plant good seeds, pull out the weeds, nurture them, provide them with the basic things they need, and they will grow. If you want more details, more specifics, and more personalized training, those resources are available. Ruben, are you available to take over some and give them a few basics and also introduce our Q&A phase?
If you'd like some further support from Life Changing Services, we do have some different options that can help you. Just click the link there, and it'll take you to some of those options. You'll go to a page on the Eternal Warriors page, which is Life Changing Services Prevention and Self-Mastery Program. But there are also lots of other links to different things, including the Life Changing Services page itself, the opportunity to download the free version of Like Dragons That They Fight, a Bishop Starter Kit if you're a bishop, and the opportunity to sign up for a complimentary session with one of our certified mentors as well, if you'd like a little more guidance in how to apply some of the principles that Maurice has shared tonight. I've got some questions here for you, Maurice. All right, so first question is from Melody. She says, what is the most effective tool to escaping addiction?
Okay, that is an awesome question that is really big. And the problem is, well, I studied addiction recovery for many, many years, fighting my own addictions, watching loved ones who are in pain, fighting addictions. This is not intended to be arrogant or anything like unto it, but the Daughters of Light program for women and the Sons of Healing for young men and Men of Moroni for adult men are the best programs for addiction recovery you're going to find. Okay, now I want to clarify that they are not designed to replace a inspired 12 steps program. 12 steps attends to the spiritual side and the healing side and the support side. The piece that's missing, think of the Sons of Healing specifically. In order for them to win their wars that they won, and in order for them to survive and not die in their life experiences, they needed both a strong connection with God and his protection and his healing, as well as significant training. The training that would empower them to respond with speed, accuracy, and strength and endurance. Otherwise, they could not have won. The training systems provided by Life Changing Services are intended to be like the boot camp part of winning addiction wars. Okay? There's a healing element for every soldier, and there's a training element. So I strongly support the 12-step systems. We provide the training. So I hope that answers that question.
Maurice, the next question is from Todd. Todd says, I'm trying to break free from a pattern where I don't feel at my best unless my marriage is in a good place. How can I find more emotional strength when my marriage is on the rocks?
Oh, this is a good one. This is a common one too. Okay. Now, my science, again, presented a set of principles that has been very anxiety producing for me because it's a blatant contradiction. Okay. In one school of thought, they had us in graduate school learn a skill where you take the husband and the wife and you have each one of them make a list of their needs, and then they exchange that list. The unspoken assumption is you are probably going to not be at your best and you're going to not function as well as you could until your spouse meets your needs. You're going to be dysfunctional. you're going to be less functional. And there's quite a bit of literature out there that supports this idea. A spouse should work to meet your needs. And in parentheses, and it's not usually said out loud, and you're allowed to be less functional or dysfunctional until they do so. Okay? Now, out of the other side of their mouth, they say, but don't be codependent. Don't be now, this definition of codependent is I'm dependent on what you provide me with, and you're dependent on what I provide you with. So wait till the other person meets your needs, but don't be codependent. Now, if you look again, as mentioned before, you find more useful principles in gospel principles, or that which is provided to us by prophets. Phrases like, do not rely upon the arm of flesh, and thou shalt have no other gods before me. So with this case specifically, I would get a sided 3x5 card, and on one side put, I am sad because my wife ... or I have less energy because she did this or did not do this. So write down the thought that justifies your decrease in functioning. Okay? On the other side, put the true principle that says, if I was training my own child, I would never train my son. Son, you're probably not going to be fully functional until a woman is meeting your needs. Okay? No, you would never say that. Son, you need to work hard on being so strong that when your future wife has a bad day, when your children are throwing up, when everything around you is falling apart, you are strong and you are powerful and you are connected to God. The cornerstone of our hearts and minds and psychological functioning should be God and his team, not our spouses. So this one, you take a basic principle, just like was mentioned before. You put the false principle on one side of the card. You put the true principle on the other side of the card. You just keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And you keep adding energy to the true side. You nurture it until it gains momentum. And then over time, it becomes automatic. And anytime that negative thought or that useless thought comes to mind, it is within a split second replaced by the more useful positive thought. I hope that helps. Ruben?
Maurice, the next question is from Nikki. She asks, how do I know if a son or a husband is struggling with sexual abuse?
Well, usually you don't know. That's the challenge. You don't know, okay? But women and some men who work hard to have hypersensitivity, which, by the way, I don't consider a negative term, sensitivity at a heightened level. We have so many arenas where we applaud that, but sometimes we consider it a negative thing in our culture or with people. So you can't know for sure. Now, I've practiced doing something called pinging, okay? But this does take work, and it's usually better done by a therapist than a mom or a wife. And I will ask questions like, when was the last time you saw pornography? But I'm not really listening for their answer. I'm watching facial gestures and micro gestures. If I say, when was the last time you saw pornography? And they have recently saw it, you'll see twitches in the eyes, a little change of color in their face. You'll see a little micro change in their breathing. You'll see faster than expected responses or slower than expected responses. There's so many things, but it's really hard to train. But in reality, it's not really, this is going to be a little disturbing, but it's really not that important that you know. Okay, it's not important that you know. Okay, you can use all sorts of phrases like, if, son, you have this problem, then I hope that you will allow us to engage you in some training for it. Husband, if you have this problem, then I hope that you will get the training that you need. Now, when you say if, and you don't say it with judgment, but you say it with concern, with loving angst. Now, if the person is ready for receiving help, they will respond in a sorrowful, but it's usually more than necessary. Like, oh, I'm the worst person ever. That's not necessary. Unfortunately, if they're not ready to be taught and trained, they will probably have a defensive reaction. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Why are you always blaming me for stuff? Okay, So sadly, it's unlikely that you're going to know, because a skilled misbehavior or addict will always find a way to hide things from you that you're not going to be able to catch. Okay, so sorry, but I don't have a very direct response to that one. Ruben, what's next?
Maurice Josh asks, I'm finding myself in a rut. How do I find motivation and the willpower to get out and bounce back higher?
Okay. I hope this doesn't surprise you, but that's a common question we get also. How do I find the motivation? Now, the problem with the question, and it is a classical addiction question, the problem with the question is, how do I partake of the fruit before I do the gardening? Motivation is a biochemical experience. It is a emotion and chemical experience that is a surge of energy before you take action. Okay? If you're waiting to feel like it, you're going to be waiting for a very long time. All right? Now, if you read closely the scriptures primarily referring to the Book of Mormon, men who lacked motivation, men who did not act upon true principles before they felt like it, so that they could harvest the good feelings, men and women, for that matter, but mostly men are being referred to, eventually God provided them with a set of significant external motivators. The two most common, wars and famines. If you are waiting for a feeling to motivate you, and because God is not controlling and will not manipulate you into doing good, he's probably not going to provide you with motivation other than this is a true principle, you should follow it. Until you lose everything you care about through either a war or a famine. Something will attack you and take it away from you, or it will just die and go away. I have the very painful experience of being a marriage therapist as well, and I have the sad experience of watching many men lose their wives and children. And then they are motivated. And then they are ready to do the work. As you might guess, that's a bad idea. So on a 3x5 card, just like planned before, you write down what should be motivating you, what could be motivating you, then you nurture it. Okay? You could lose this, and you could lose that, and you could lose this, and you could lose that. You can gain this. Okay? Now, sadly for me, I have more often been motivated by pain than by hope and love. I've been more motivated by fear than by hope and love. Fear of loss, pain of loss. And to say that I'm cheated, I chose this profession partially for real live reminders. When I see the pain that misbehavior causes, both the behavior and the ones who live with them, it gives me multiple daily reminders. So if you want to wait until you feel lots of pain, that will work. Otherwise, write it down and repeat, write and repeat, write and repeat. Okay? Ruben, what's next?
Maurice, we've got several questions that are left. The one that is the most relevant to the session tonight, I'm going to ask, and I'll let you decide if you have time for further ones beyond that. I know we're about 10 minutes over.
Okay.
The closest question that I wanted to ask is the thought, I can never be forgiven, from Satan. Why do I believe it so easily?
Yes, the thought that you can never be forgiven is from Satan. Now, if you study the other lessons and some of the future lessons, you're going to notice that, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, God, because he is not willing to manipulate us, he will not use thoughts that stimulate a lot of emotion. He will not use thoughts that create a lot of noticeable sensation. Okay? But the dark side doesn't play by the same rule. The dark side is willing to use thoughts that feel louder than divine thoughts. They are more painful, they're more scary, they're more depressing, they're more anxiety producing, they're more stimulating, they always have a stronger emotional connection to them because he's engaging your brain chemistry. And the idea that you will never be forgiven has a lot of energy behind it. Oh, that is such a scary thought. That's such a painful thought. Okay. Besides, you have so much doctrine available to you that tells you that is a lie. I don't know the exact quote, but something like, do you really think you can sin beyond the power of the atonement? Do you really think you have that much power to sin beyond the atonement? Okay, so please write down some thoughts that will help you remember that that is a completely inaccurate thought. So Ruben's going to post just a single link for those of you who want more information, more clarity, more definition of how things work and what they're used for. Some people function just fine with a little bit of education, a little bit of pondering, a little bit of application. Others really like to work with teams. We have teams that work together. We also have one-on-one coaches that work well with people. We have simple, just kind of the person who spots you in the weight room kind of training, all the way to some pretty significant in-your-face kind of training that can help you create change. And when I mean in-your-face, very edifying pressure, very uplifting pressure, very personal love-based pressure. Okay, but sometimes it's a lot of work and we got to figure some stuff out. All right, we'll talk to you later.